Good evening, everyone. We'd like to call to order the regular January 9th, 2023 meeting of the Birmingham City Commission. If you would all join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Bingham, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Long.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McLean.
Here.
Commissioner Ballard.
Here.
Commissioner Boudreaux.
Here.
Commissioner Hay.
Here.
Commissioner Hope.
Here.
Commissioner Schaefer.
Here. Thank you. We now move to proclamations, congratulatory resolutions, awards, appointments, resignations, and confirmations, administration of oath, and introduction of guests and announcements. The city recommends that members of the public wear a mask if they've been exposed to COVID-19 or have a respiratory illness. City staff, city commission, and all board and committee members must wear a mask if they've been exposed to COVID-19 or actively have a respiratory illness. The city continues to provide KN95 respirators and triple-layered masks for attendees that are available in the back and the front of the room. We have a exciting, hot off the presses announcement that is not in our agenda packet this evening. City Manager Marcus and city staff learned at 4:28 this afternoon from Congresswoman Haley Stevens' staff that they are very proud to announce that all 15 community funding projects that Congresswoman Stevens supported were included in the omnibus spending package that was supported on December 23rd, 2022. And one of those packages is in support of a Birmingham project. It's called Birmingham Combined Sewer System Critical Rehabilitation Program Project. The requested amount and the awarded amount are $1.3 million. The project was based on the comprehensive condition assessment that the city conducted of its combined sanitary sewer system in 2019, which revealed that over 60% of the system needed some work. Recommendations were made for rehabilitating existing sewers to extend their useful life, as opposed for waiting for failures. And the city identified 150 sewer segments that needed critical repairs. The proposed project will provide the funding to include various rehabilitation methods to address the identified issues, including removal of accumulated debris or sediment, lining sewers, root mass removals, mineral deposit removals, excavation and pipe replacement where needed in the most severely deteriorated sections, and other trenchless rehabilitation techniques. So we would absolutely like to extend our thanks and gratitude to Representative Haley Stevens for pushing this project forward and winning this funding for us. And we'd also like to call out Jim Surhai and Scott Zielinski for their work on this project, and Melissa Fairborn, who pulled all of the documentation together on very short notice and got it to Congresswoman Stevens' office. So I think a round of applause. So good. $1.3 million.
Infrastructure.
Yes. Very
Yay.
good. Okay, next up on the agenda was County Commissioner Cavell, who is supposed to be speaking to us, and he appears to be a little bit late. So I think we can move to the appointment and then perhaps come back to Commissioner Cavell when he gets here. We have an appointment, since those are both under the same agenda, item 3. We have an appointment to the Historic District Commission, and we have Mary E.J., who is applying to be an alternate member of the Historic District Commission to serve the remainder of a 3-year term to expire September 25th, 2025. Welcome, Ms. J. Why don't you please tell us why you're interested?
Of course. Well, let me give you a little background on myself. I undergraduate from Michigan State in marketing, graduate degree from Michigan in strategic planning and international business. And I just retired from a 39-year career at Chrysler, Stellantis, FCA, Daimler Chrysler. I went through them all. So I was involved, I had a senior position there and was involved in all aspects of developing, producing, distributing, and marketing our vehicles, and in particular in our international markets. So actually, the last 10 years, I've focused on Jeep's global expansion. So I loved what I did, but a lot of time and a lot of travel. So now with retirement, I have the opportunity to focus on things that I'm passionate about. So I've lived in the little San Francisco district for 30 years. I was originally attracted to the area because of the age of the homes. At that time when I bought, most of the homes were between 1910 and 1930. So I just have had a lifelong passion for historic structures. I believe they add personality, they connect us to our past, they help us in our sense of identity and our connection to the community. I also believe that they provide charm and architectural interest, and that really that they can be viable alternatives in our ever-changing and mass-produced world. I think they offer authenticity and individualism, and I think you can combine the two, and I've tried to do that myself. So in my home, when I bought it, was only 900 square feet, but I put on an addition that maintained the integrity of the main structure, but just brought it up to modern living. I actually have also purchased a home in Royal Oak, a 1917 Craftsman Foursquare that I'm renovating for the rental market. And what else is my background in preservation? In 1992, I helped co-found the Metropolitan Detroit Preservation League. We were a group of former Preservation Wayne, which I think is now Preservation Detroit, but Preservation Wayne members that wanted to focus more on the metropolitan area, not just in Detroit. So we provided volunteer support, marketing, tours of historic areas in the metropolitan area, Royal Oak, Pontiac. We were involved in getting the Smiley House in Detroit sold. So we were really trying to support in particular, the historic homes in the neighborhoods. So I guess with my qualification, I think those are great qualifications for the preservation world. I think also my career in business has helped. Experience with legal contracts, program management, motivating and developing team members. So really, I guess in the end, I believe that, I was attracted to Birmingham because of the unique and historic downtown, the neighborhoods, and I think that's why a lot of people are interested in Birmingham, and I'd like to be part of maintaining that and developing our history as well as our future growth.
Well, thank you. That was a most robust answer.
We're super excited.
Probably the
about
best
this.
we've ever had. Yeah. And I'm not sure anyone has any questions, but I'll invite any questions from any of the commissioners. None? All right, thank you. So do we have a nomination?
I'd like to nominate.
Commissioner Boutros.
You're overqualified, and we thank you for volunteering.
Okay, I don't know
and
about
making
that,
a
but-
difference, I hope. I'd like to nominate Ms. Mary J. as an alternate member to the Historic District Commission to serve the remainder of a 3-year term to expire September 25th, 2025.
All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, congratulations, and Ms. Bingham will
you.
swear you in.
Oh, thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm gonna grab the book.
Okay.
Charlie can talk and then I'll.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll
Table that for
defer
now.
that then. We have with us this evening County Commissioner Charles Cavell, who has a brief presentation and would like to introduce himself as our new, just sworn in, I believe, County Commissioner.
Yeah. Hello, everybody.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, I heard my name got called and I wasn't here. Apologies for the tardiness. I was paying for parking because last time I came here, I found out how much not paying for parking costs. Oh. So I'm already contributing to Birmingham. I brought along with me something that maybe the clerk could pass out to you members afterwards. It's a report. Okay.
All right, you go ahead.
Thanks. Okay, so I want to go through real quick, and I don't know how fast you'd like me to be. I can talk faster or slower.
10 minutes, I think is great.
10 minutes, okay. So I want to go over some 2022 achievements and 2023 plans to date. So the achievements, this is a team sport, we all know this. So this is Oakland County government and our commission as a whole of what we've done. And this is what I'll show you is just a snapshot of a few things that I think are pertinent to Birmingham City Commission. And 2023 plans to date, I say to date because this is a working document, this is open. I and all of us work for you. So if you have something you'd like to add, let me know. Next slide, please. Okay. So just a couple of snippets of what we've done. I laid it out in physical infrastructure and human infrastructure. So physical infrastructure, stuff like critical infrastructure, right? Grants for water safety, 21st Century Parks Initiative. This is something that Birmingham benefited from. So, right, but a place, right? Placemaking. Parks are a physical thing. Senior center grants. So that's a thing that, it's a physical place. Human infrastructure, age in place / chore services program. That's not building something, that's not brick and mortar, but that is a service, and that's building what we like to call in government nowadays, infrastructure of a different sort. The transit millage, same sort of idea, gun buyback and child care scholarship. Now you'll see I've starred two things. That's the senior center grants and the aging in place chore services program. So that is based on the recommendation of the Oakland County Blueprint for Healthy Aging, which is a report you should have before you. So that is something that took, it was actually very expedient for government work. It was like a 11-month process that we worked with a whole host of senior advocate organizations, the Area Agency on Aging, as well as each and every senior center in the county, all 36 of them, to get their input and have them as a part of the committee. And so what you will see in that report is a whole host, I think it's something like 35 recommendations, and like who, what, when, where, why, how to implement them, because as you may know, Michigan is aging faster than Florida. Oakland County is also aging very quickly within the context of Michigan, let alone the rest of the country. So this is not just a social issue about how do we care for our seniors and be cognizant of aging with dignity, but it's also something related to economic development. How do we stay vital? Next slide, please. Did I do that?
Here we go.
There it is.
Okay. Looked bigger when I printed it on my piece of paper, forgive me. If you can't read it, so this is the accomplishments in detail. So first, to explain a couple of things we've done, critical infrastructure grants. So we awarded $3.8 million to 38 communities to fund planning and improvements focused mostly on water, but also projects that qualified were things related to the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, the big bipartisan, or Infrastructure and Jobs Act of 2021. So this is to help communities, local governments plan for how they can do big physical infrastructure projects if they were to start getting IIJA money. The 21st Century Parks Initiative, that was a $20 million effort. And all of these, I should mention, are funded through ARPA, so it's federal COVID relief dollars, so it's not using, it's using like 0.1% of your direct tax dollars because we're using federal funds, so it's not free money, but it's very cheap money because it's a federal grant of over $200 million to Oakland County government. And we put $20 million of it into improving parks and expanding park land space focused on Southeast Oakland County, and some of that money went to Booth Park. Senior Center grants. So this is something that is active. I'm glad that Chris is here because she can vouch for this or call me out. But we set aside, and I'm really proud of this actually because I wrote like the literal words to put this together, $5 million to update and improve senior centers. So that is physical infrastructure. So it's technology, it's buildings, it's wires. It's not focused on programs so much, but it can be if you kind of finagle it. And the max award is $250,000 per community center around Oakland County, and Birmingham Next has applied. And so everyone should be hearing back from the senior ad hoc committee, which made this report and then created this resolution that then got funded. So this will all be, we'll hear back on whether or not Birmingham Next got this in mid-February, as well as all the other communities. The Housing Security Initiative, that was a big deal. I also spearheaded this. This is $17 million to offer more attainable and inclusive housing. So attainable means working on the missing middle. That might be a phrase we've heard or will hear soon, or if we have millennial kids at home, we're hearing it because they're living at home still. But missing middle, it's middle income housing becoming less and less attainable because there's less and less housing stock. So making sure that more of that can be built out, again, because it's an economic development imperative, we think, at the county. And so that's what attainable means. Inclusive means being cognizant of Oakland County being a place for people to work, live, and play. And again, emphasizing the fact that we are aging quickly. That also means thinking about seniors on fixed incomes. There was also part of that housing security initiative, a resolution to create model language for source of income discrimination protection so that local municipalities can pass that resolution. 5 or 6 municipalities in Oakland County have since done so after we worked with the fair. You're good. After we worked with the Fair Housing Center of Metro Detroit to draft that language. Next slide, please. So this is human infrastructure. This is the people stuff, the less tangible things, but the things that are extremely important. So the Age in Place program. So this will come back in a future slide. This was a big deal because it's $3 million to match the Area Agency on Aging's allocation from the Older Americans Act, so matching federal dollars for chore services. So that means helping subsidize the cost of activities for daily living for seniors throughout the county. And that subsidization pays for things that include like cleaning and bathing, but also snow plowing and lawn mowing. So this is something that's very integral to collaborating with our cities on. Transit millage, this is something that was a big push. You remember me coming here talking about that, I hope. And ever since the vote, everyone said they voted for it, but I know that not everyone voted for it, but that's okay. Thanks for laughing, Elaine. So this also lowered Birmingham's millage rate as it relates to transit, down to 0.95 mils from what it used to be. Third thing that we did that was a big deal was a gun buyback. So this I mentioned particularly because Birmingham can participate next year if we're able to secure the funding for round 2 of this. So what we did is work with 7 local police departments around the county. The sheriff did not participate other than like clearing and forensic labbing the guns. But we had 7 local police departments participate, and we secured in under 3 hours over 300 guns, including 5 assault rifles and 2 weapons that were used in criminal activity. So that was a cool thing. And we also did a child care scholarship. So this is part of the broader plan of workforce development in the county to help people achieve post-secondary educational attainment. So that can be getting a license or a certificate or a community college degree or a bachelor's degree, some sort of education that gives you some sort of increased income as a result of going to that schooling. And so part of that thinking is, well, if people are trying to get back into the workforce, because one thing just to note is in Michigan, this is like a fun fact, in Michigan, 230,000 women dropped out of the workforce in the first 6 months of COVID, and I believe it was 45,000 men did. So this is trying to help ameliorate that problem, and it's a $1,200 child benefit, which if you get a child tax credit when you file your taxes, that gives you 2 free months of full-time childcare, or you can split that $1,200 benefit throughout a year, however you're able to until that money's maxed out. And that money goes straight to a child care center, so there's minimal opportunity for fraud or abuse. And that one I did too. Like that was my baby, so that's why I wanted to put that up there for y'all. Next slide, please. So as we think about what we're gonna do next year, and hopefully we can all have this conversation, is think about first lowering bills, and then second, increasing supports for people. So that's kind of the framework we're working off of. So for seniors, we need to actualize the Age in Place grant. So I mentioned that we had set aside $3 million for aging in place and chore services, but we did not actually appropriate that money because we wanted to make sure we collaborated more with the Area Agency on Aging to make sure we weren't duplicating services and that we communicated appropriately with the cities on how that should look. Because there's this kind of Swiss cheese mesh of what services given by which cities and if they use their own DPW or if they use vendors and all these sorts of things. So we want to make sure we do this right. So we've set the money aside, but we haven't actually deployed it to serve our residents. And one thing to note here is I, as our county commissioner, will be the representative for the Area Agency on Aging for Oakland County next year, for the next 2 years. So hopefully this becomes a very important thing on our to-do list. For utilities, this is also something that's kind of looming over us, is Water Affordability Fund. There are 13,000 households in Oakland County that are at risk of water-based foreclosure, which means their water bill has gotten so far behind that now they might lose the house. And while we may or may not be one of those 13,000 households, because we all do live in the same water utility billing area, the bill's going to fall on us at some point. So we need to make sure that we, one, hopefully prevent this looming homelessness wave, and also water shutoff wave, and also not raise everyone's bills in an inordinate way. So there's a plan afoot that uses philanthropy and some ARPA money so that we can do something. We just have to actually pull the trigger and do it. Second thing about utilities, electricity rate case interventions. So this is one of the things we've been working with the sustainability director at Oakland County Executive's office on. And what's interesting, and I don't know if anyone watching knows this, but tell me if I'm wrong, Tom or anyone, but the city of Birmingham pays rent to DTE for the streetlights. So the city of Birmingham also has a light bill just like we do at home, and it never goes down. So there's interesting things we can.
When the lights go out.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So there's an interesting opportunity there that the mayor and Tom and I have talked about, and other cities are doing it around the state. So there might be an interesting rate case intervention opportunity there. And then families. So this, so this is kind of the more how, if only we could type thing. So these are aspirational, but I think they could be done if the willpower is there, which is launch an emergency savings program. And particularly, as you might see here, I put down that 30% of Oakland County residents cannot afford to cover a $400 emergency. And that number is only getting higher because that comes from a United Way report from 2019. And of that 30% of Oakland County residents, 44% of those people are senior head of households, so people 65 and up that are on a fixed income. With the new transit millage, there's thinking about how we could do our fare box collection differently. So when you have to pay to get on the bus, there's a whole bunch of things from around the country that they're doing that might make it cheaper or more innovative. And medical debt relief, this is something that Toledo just did, which is use some of their federal ARPA money to help relieve medical debt for qualifying people. And so we're talking to some hospitals about that. So I mentioned some of these because if any of you know anyone or anything about any of these, would love to get the introduction and talk more about it. And then also launching a children's savings accounts program. This has been a big priority of the county executive, and it's when a teenager has even $25 in a savings account earmarked for post-secondary education, it increases their likelihood of going to college by like 3 times. So that's something that we've been thinking about and trying to figure out, a whole bunch of departments in the county executive's office for the last couple of years. So this might be the year. And then lastly, lowering bills. We're going to do the Headley rollback from the county government, which we do every year, but this will be the first year that your property tax will be under 4 mills from the county. And then the last slide, increasing supports. So I put in parentheses the emphasis of these bullet points, because we're talking about increasing things instead of lowering things. So the emphasis with housing this year that we've been thinking about at the county commission is aging with dignity. So that means collaborating with state and local government regarding housing and seniors. So that means housing stock quality, in other words, repairs, so that seniors particularly seniors, can afford to stay housed and age in place. Second, it's housing stock affordability. So what happens if you're a senior and you are on a fixed income and you would like to stay in your community? How can we make sure that that's something that works out for you? And then also rights or privileges of being someone that is aging with dignity. So tenant-landlord mediation, this is something that can help a lot of renters, including senior renters. Just cause eviction, that's something that's been talked about a lot at the state since the House and Senate flip. Yep, since both of them flip. Source of income discrimination being a state law. That's also something that's been advocated for up in Lansing as well. When we talk about small business, the emphasis here is thinking about retention. So we have a thing called a BRN, a Business Resource Network, which basically, I see some uniting, okay, so it's basically you get a social worker in there to help a business be able to provide supports and services to employees that is outside of what like an HR department would do. So if you have employees that are having trouble getting to work, you can have this Business Resource Network navigator help people find a way to get to work, right? Bus passes, car loan, all that sort of stuff. So it's a unique model, and it's been done in other countries and around the U.S., and Oakland County started this one up in 2021, and we'd like to expand it. And it's good with retention for business owners. Same thing with apprenticeships. It's, as we see the whole quiet quitting and all this sort of thing, we've been talking to big businesses here in Oakland County about how we can get people into work that might not already be employed or upskill people. And one of the ways to do that is an apprenticeship, but then also for the business, again, is retention, because people are getting a $15 an hour job and then leaving next week for the $16 an hour job. If you get people in an apprenticeship, they're likely to stay longer. And then public safety, the emphasis here is thinking about smart justice. So by that what I mean is, as you see in the examples, increase the number of co-responders, which Birmingham is a model of. I want to make sure I repeat that. You all are a model of this. So we are, at the county, me and a couple other commissioners are just trying to copy what you all already did with a SAMHSA grant with OCHN to have a co-responder, which is a mental health professional who's able to respond, be a co-responder along with police once the scene is safe. Because, as you see here, 44% of the people in Oakland County Jail have a diagnosable mental health condition, and most of the time people interact with a police officer and there is like a serious incident, someone that can do de-escalation and someone who has a skill set related to mental health is just smart justice. I'm a member of the Prosecutors Gun Violence Prevention Commission, so we're going to be coming up with a report of recommendations in July. Some of the things that we've been talking a lot about is the sequential intercept model. So I'm getting really wonky, but happy to explain more if you'd like, and also restorative justice. And then we'd like to do a gun buyback 2.0. And second thing about public safety, or last thing about public safety, community relations. So there's this program called Lights On that's been done around the country, and it's run by a nonprofit. And instead of giving people instead of just giving people fix-it tickets for taillights, is giving people that fix-it ticket and then also a voucher that is funded partially by a nonprofit and partially by the local government, which could be the county. And so it helps build stronger community relations and gives people a free taillight fix. And that's it. I got my number on here, the last one.
Thank you so much,
Yep.
Commissioner Cavell, for sharing all that. That was really informative.
Thanks.
The parks money went to Adams Park,
Thank you.
but we would hope to be talking to the county later this year about some trail projects we have in mind that would
Cool.
encompass Booth Park and the Historical Museum.
Fantastic.
We're already looking at the sample ordinances, as you know, that you provided for the tenant's right to renew and the source of income discrimination protection, and we thank you for those. The information to support seniors is really relevant to us because developing services to support aging in place for seniors is a strategic goal for Birmingham for 2023, and I note our new strategic goals are there on the wall, and that's one of them in the middle there, or no, under engagement and connected community. And so I'm really glad you were able to share this information with the public and the commission tonight at this public meeting. because that's where this information belongs, in the public forum, at a public meeting, so that we can move these efforts forward with community involvement and rather than just, sharing with a few commissioners in private meetings. Mayor Pro Tem McLean and I were very pleased to meet with you and city staff and Senior Advocate Jim McGuire, and thank you for that connection, who was the previous interim director for the area agency OMB, to learn about the resources available at the county and state level and how they can inform our efforts to support seniors going forward. And when we get to the appropriate point in tonight's agenda, I will be asking the commission to consider for a future agenda item the formation of an ad hoc committee on senior needs, where we can sit down and have that committee determine how to undertake an assessment of current resources and current needs for seniors, and then to work on developing our recommendations. So very relevant, very timely. Thank you very much, and hopefully we can have you again back in a year.
Nice.
So thank you. All right, now we get to open to the public for items not on the agenda. If you'd like to make a comment for a topic that is not on the agenda this evening, you are welcome to come to the microphone, state your name and address, and make your remark.
Hi, David Bloom. Good evening and Happy New Year. The comments that I have to make are related to some things in the packet at the end under staff reports and information only. Normally, public comment is not solicited at that time. I am happy to hold my comments until that time or to make them now if you so prefer.
I'll defer to council.
This is reserved, I'm sorry, is it okay?
Yeah, very good.
This is reserved for discussion points that are not on the agenda. I'm not reserving your comments until the agenda item is addressed.
I'm very happy to do that. I just hope if I come up that I have an opportunity to speak then.
And we'll reserve that, and please remind us if we speak over you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other comments in the room? I see none. Any online? I see none. So we will move to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion and approved by a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of the items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the general order of business and considered under the last item of new business. Are there any items that commissioners would like to remove from the agenda? Commissioner Haig.
Item H, please.
Item H. Any others? I see none in the room. Any items the public would like to move from the consent agenda? See none in the room and none online. A motion, please.
To move the consent agenda excluding item H.
Second?
Second by, we'll take Commissioner, Mayor Pro Tem McLean. Ms. Bingham, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Boutros?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Mayor Long?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McLean?
Yes.
Commissioner Haig?
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Yes.
And would the commission like to take this item H now?
Sure.
Commissioner Haig, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The only reason I pulled it is I would just like to have some corrections made to some awkwardness in the linguistics, just so that it's tidied up. Nothing as to content, it was just cleaning it so that it presents nicely when it goes for the next round of signatures. That was it. Thank you.
And
What are they?
Did you?
do you
I
want
didn't understand it.
to
Sorry.
point those out?
No need. I can
You'll do that
show
at-
Alex separately. It was just
There's
a
some
minor-
typos and so forth.
Okay.
So,
That's all it is. Nothing content related. Just didn't want it to go further with those.
all right, so
Minimus changes.
Absolutely, yes.
it's de minimis changes. All right, so Commissioner Haig, would you like to move that agenda item?
Yes, motion to move agenda item H with the comments as provided just now.
All right, second by
Second.
Commissioner McLean. Ms. Bingham?
Mayor Long?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McLean?
Yes.
Commissioner Boutros?
Yes.
Commissioner Haig?
Yes?
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Fantastic. We now move to unfinished business. We have none. So we move to new business. And our first item is a resolution to approve a time frame for interviews in which the city manager candidates will be interviewed remotely by the city commission. And that is that Mr. Lambert or you?
Well, Joe will probably chime in as well. He's online.
Okay.
I'd like to just share a little bit of information about this process. We had in the mid-30 of applicants. We have provided the resumes of who we clearly think are the top 6 candidates. But I'll point out something. We sent them to the commission as confidential. These individuals haven't been told they're finalists, okay? And if you looked at some of the resumes, you'll note that they asked for confidentiality. Usually, in these search processes, the candidates are allowed confidentiality until the interviews occur. And these are finalists, but there is a refinement process that will follow the interviews of the 6 candidates. So, assuming the commission is okay with the 6 finalists, we would then schedule them for interviews. Now, one of the cautions I'll make to you is that because we have not reached out to them as to scheduling, it's not unusual to lose a candidate, maybe even 2, in the process. This is a little different than the private sector. And what happens is some of these candidates start to consider the impact on their current position, and they aren't willing to risk the public exposure that occurs. In discussions with the city attorney has opined that we are required to hold these interviews in public. Personally, that's the only way I would do it in recommendations to you, because you learn a lot about how somebody acts in public or reacts in public to the interview process. We will formulate a list of questions for the commission. You want to maintain standardized questions. Once you receive those, if the commissioners feel that there's additional questions that they would like to pose, you can submit those to us and we'll try and work those in. But to be fair, the same question should be asked of all of the candidates going forward. Once you've had the interviews, we would hope you'd be able to narrow it down to 3 to 4 candidates. And we would then schedule what we refer to in the business as a meet and greet. And we would take these candidates, and the commissioners would certainly be invited, but we would take the candidates to a public setting, probably larger than this, invite the public to come in, and we would hear from each of the candidates about their backgrounds, their experiences, what they see in Birmingham, what they like about Birmingham, how they would serve Birmingham. We would then turn it over that 3 or 4 of these candidates would be sent to different parts of that room, and we would have the public given the opportunity to go up and talk to each of the candidates and ask them questions, whatever questions they saw fit, and engage with these candidates. We would then follow up with all of that and have our tool that we use to get some of that feedback from the persons that had the chance to come to this meeting and interview the candidates themselves and talk to the candidates and get that feedback, which we would share with the commission. The commission would then schedule the final interviews with the finalists that survived the process, and you would sit down and have those interviews again in public, and then consider making an offer to one of the candidates. And then there's a process that starts where you probably enter into a negotiation phase in terms of entering into an agreement with the candidate that you prefer. Again, most of this stuff is going to occur in public, and at the end of the day, that's the legal opinion that's been rendered by the city attorney, but I would tell you it's probably the best way to handle all of this as a practical matter as well. And it fleshes out a lot of the candidates' qualities and maybe concerns that you may have or they may have about the position. And you develop somewhat of a bit of a relationship and understanding of who you will be hiring as your next manager. And finally, I would say, this is the most exciting topic for me because it creates my final exit and transition for me on the way out of Birmingham, and I hope that you pick the best candidate you possibly can for this position. This is a bit unusual from the standpoint that you're really being given, I think, a pretty big advance, a better opportunity, because you have all of this occurring while your current manager is in place. I don't intend to recommend a candidate. That's not my business. It's up to you to decide who your candidate is. But I will remind you that it was this commission and some of your predecessors, for some of the newer commissioners, that decided when I was hired to enter into a 2.5-year agreement. And one of the provisions of that agreement was that I would hire an assistant, I would mentor an assistant, and that assistant would be trained to be eligible to assume the position. But that would only be as a part of a competitive process. And so that expectation is that that person would be qualified to be considered, but that's a decision exclusively reserved by this city commission. So I'll be glad to answer any questions at this point that you may have.
So I want to just ask the commissioners all to think about any particular questions that they might have that they want to submit to the city manager, or is it to you or to Joe Lambert?
You can give it, yeah, I think probably to me to be, well,
Okay.
Joe is fine. You can send it to Joe.
Any questions they want asked of all 6 candidates?
We'll get the questions that we would pose, because we don't want you, thinking
Right.
that you've got this great question and we've already included. We do this a lot in terms of all of the positions that we hire for. And so
And-
these are a little
Right,
bit more
and to
unique.
remind the commissioners that we received those resumes and names in confidence, that they are not to be shared with friends or family or acquaintances or left in a place where they can be seen until those individuals agree to an interview, and even then, the documents we received are confidential, and that no commissioner should be reaching out to any of those candidates for any ex parte communications or to ask any questions in advance. So with that,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's actually part of my question. Just to respect what we have heard earlier of the confidentiality, that these individuals could lose a job because of one leak that could happen unintentionally or unintentionally. My question to our city manager are all individuals that we have already been informed with, you will be contacting them to tell them about the process will be taking place publicly, because
Yes.
that's pretty much will maybe they will quit the process should they choose to, but our duty is to respect their confidentiality, and just confirming with you that they will be aware of what we have agreed on tonight to follow the process publicly,
Right.
because that's going to break the confidentiality.
Yes.
Correct? Okay.
Yes, and I would point out to you, it said the range was in the mid-30s. Joe, as you're listening to this conversation, if you want to chime in, that's fine. But I would say that's not unusual for the numbers I'm seeing across the country. In years past, you might have seen 60 to 100 candidates, depending on the job, but that's just not the norm anymore. And honestly, that's what we're seeing with so many of our other positions with the city as well. The same strains on the private sector are certainly being felt in the private sector, or public sector, in terms of trying to get a number of candidates in. And to another point previously, we did reach out to candidates too. You should understand that knowing what the process was, some candidates are going to probably watch this process to see how it all turns out. I'm sure some might avoid it, thinking, well, there is likely an internal. That was a very public, discussion when I was hired. So I had reached out to others during the process of hiring an assistant to see if they were interested. And Some didn't necessarily, some were managers, okay? Some were fairly high-ranking assistants. And some of them at that time didn't want to go through this step and not have any kind of guarantee that they were going to be the manager, right? So it's all pretty much normal kind of situations that occur in these hiring processes. But tonight, what I'm asking is that you set aside a time for these interviews. And if you're going to have 6, I've booked about 8 hours. You could do it reasonably in maybe 2 different settings of 4 hours each, or you could do it 8-hour a day. There's any way that you can break this up. Sometimes it gives you a better sense of candidates when you have a group of them, so that you can kind of compare notes and understand, relative to each other, which one has the attributes that you may personally be thinking are important for the manager's position.
So I have one further question. So of the 30-ish candidates, Mr. Lambert, were all of them, did they all meet the criteria that we established? Or were some of them not qualified?
Some of them were not qualified. There were a good number that were kind of like on the right track, but didn't have enough. But unfortunately, with every recruitment, there's a large number that just didn't really understand the position and were not a good fit for it in any way.
So
I would
these,
say,
oh, I say, so the ones you move forward are the premium? Or the most?
Correct.
Most, okay, thank you. So what is the commission's thoughts for our schedules? Are we looking for dates today, or do we want to do like a Google poll for that, or
Well, if you have some ideas for dates, I'd like to hear them so we can,
So-
because you folks are probably the most complicated part of getting it together. I need
Yes.
dates from you.
So I know that Martin Luther King Day is an open holiday for me, but, but no. Well, first of all, do we want 1 8-hour day, 2 4-hour days, or 4 2-hour days? 2-hour periods? What is, you think?
And I'll remind you, a week from Saturday, you have long-range planning,
Right.
and then that following Monday, you have a commission meeting as well.
Correct. So let's not pick that weekend.
The
Okay.
question is, do we have a deadline, a time frame? When would you like, hypothetically speaking, to have this arranged? And maybe we'll look at the week after our long-range planning. Is that feasible?
Yeah, that is feasible, and it
Okay.
probably gives people enough advance notice that they can schedule around it too. Serious candidates are going to set aside
Yes.
personal
Time.
life to be here.
So in 2 weeks from today, kind of. Would you like, Madam Mayor, to
Let's-
do your idea with the Google? and
I think
see?
we should do a poll, because, some of us are going to have to look at work calendars as well and figure out what's.
But I think I'll take questions in a second. I'd like to
And-
establish whether we want
Go ahead.
1 day, or 2 half-days,
I think
or
2
4 quarter
halves
days.
personally.
And these meetings are scheduled to be Zoom.
Right.
Okay, not for the commissioners, but for the candidates.
So we're going to be here in person, and the
Yes.
candidates will be Zooming?
Yes,
Okay.
and the reason for that is some are coming a distance, and rather than, flight, not just flight cost, but considering the status of the airline industry,
Yeah.
getting them here on
Arriving at
time and
home.
not having all those other complications. And if you're gonna bring one in, if you're gonna Zoom one because of that, you should Zoom them all in terms of fairness of the process.
Madam Mayor, may I give my suggestion?
Certainly.
I personally would prefer 2 days a week, 2 hours each, and 2 days the following week, 2 hours each. That will give us 2 weeks to complete it, and then we're not really tying like 4 days a week just for, it's a lot to commit to, but I mean, we want to do our best. We're busy people and we're still active.
Okay, so I have a vote for
But-
2 hours 4 times.
What would you prefer? Caitlin?
Afternoon generally is better for me in terms of not having to reschedule patients.
Okay.
If we decided on 1 whole day, I'd be amenable to doing that. But
I don't know how much
Two-
listening we do
two
to the
hours.
last candidate at one whole day, but,
That's what I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
one whole day feels like a long day.
Don't
So
think
if
one
we were
whole
to
day
do
is gonna do
2
justice.
or 4 2-hour days, I'd prefer if they were like after 1 o'clock.
okay. Commissioner Host?
I honed in on Mr. Marcus saying 2 hours, that would be 2 candidates, whereas 4 hours would be a minimum of 3. And as such, I would prefer to go with grouping of 2 4 hours. However, I'm amiable to whatever you decide.
Okay, Commissioner Baller?
Yeah, I was originally gonna push for more sessions, shorter, but then you mentioned we need to come in. I wouldn't mind just 2 sessions, but
Okay.
I would, it'd be like, can we start early, 8 to noon, or something in the afternoon that, 3 to 7, or, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay,
don't put it in the middle of the day and say,
Yeah.
so it's,
10 to 2.
we seem to be
like that.
drifting towards 3 candidates, 2 sessions. Commissioner Haig, what's your time preference generally?
Later in the day, mornings, no.
Okay, so,
So what does later mean, Commissioner?
Kind of on the same page as Commissioner Bowler. I mean, the mid to late afternoon, that's probably going to work out.
2:30?
Probably, especially if we've got to come in.
Okay.
We are going in? I thought it's a Zoom.
the candidates
We
are
go in
Zoomed, we're in
candidates are
person.
Zoomed.
We have to
We're
be in
actually
person.
here.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did not know. Okay, so I thought it's all Zoom, that's why I
Remember that
recommended 2
OMA,
2 2.
that
I
OMA
agree with
stuff
the rest
here?
then. Yeah.
The OMA
Right up there.
dictates that
And
we're in
that's-
person.
Got it. Oh,
Okay.
okay, sorry.
So,
Yeah,
all right.
It's all good. Okay.
And time zone, no issues there, right?
We'll make those adjustments, yeah. We'll make sure
Okay.
they understand.
so, we have a suggested action, so we would have a motion approving a resolution to approve a time frame of 2 sessions, 3 candidates each, and you would have someone send out a poll about dates that would be available
Yes, we will.
In the
And
2
it
weeks
should be
following, yeah.
After the.
long-range planning.
after
So,
long-range
So
plan.
moved.
so moved. Do we have a second? Commissioner Host?
It's
Any,
clear.
any comments on the motion?
And then that was generally like after 2:30 in the afternoon.
Yes.
Any amendment? Motion is clear, Alex? Okay, good.
So comments on the motion from the commission? Comments on the motion from the public? I see none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
None.
None. All right.
Now,
Questions? Are we, or are we done with the questions?
Well, we just had a motion and closed that item, but
Yeah, I know, but weren't we allowed to ask the city manager questions about the process?
I'm sorry, I thought I gave you the opportunity to ask questions.
I wish you would.
Did you have a question?
Yes, I do,
Okay.
Madam Mayor. Mr. Marcus, you mentioned that in this process, we could easily lose 2 out of the 6, just because of the public emphasis. Do you have, people, do you have a 7th and 8th and 9th candidate if these 2, for example, you suggested drop out?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I expected the question. I think, as Mr. Lambert explained, I think that the level kind of steps down a little bit after number 6, and you could consider them, but I don't think they're at the same experiential level, experiential level that the first 6 are. So you could consider them. I would say to you that if it's just 1, I'd stay with the 5. If that gives you any indication about the spread. But if it were 2, maybe you'd want to bring another 1 in for sure.
Well, I would recommend that we do, on the assumption that the fall off isn't at 7 or 8. But if you're
You would
saying
recommend we do what?
that you calls, that you add someone if you lose two.
Okay.
That would be my recommendation.
Commissioner Haig.
Similarly, I have two questions, but because of confidentiality, I haven't asked them. And I was wondering if there were questions that I can ask in closed session, because I don't want to run afoul of any confidentiality for very obvious reasons. They're not terribly complicated, but for clarification, for my own edification on certain aspects.
I'm not sure I know what you're asking me.
I want to ask you some questions not in public. I'm trying to say it politely. I want to ask questions for clarification that I don't want to ask because of confidentiality.
About specific candidates?
About specifics in the process, and it may actually be relevant to candidates, yes.
I think you can ask individual questions in a private manner, so long as you're not deliberating.
No, there's no deliberation for me at all. It's clarification only.
Sure. It can be done through email, but that's subject to FOIA, but
You can ask me directly.
But we can't go into closed session in a meeting for it because that would not be an
It's-
eligible
The
item.
only reason I thought of that was if anybody else would want the same clarification that I have. That's all. And it is not for deliberation. It is purely clarification of detail.
Okay.
Okay, so,
just a clarification, if the candidate, now, the candidate doesn't know they're a candidate at this point, the candidate requested that they go into closed session to discuss the employment, but any interviews have to be, as Mr. Marcus indicated, out in the public.
Yeah, the employment issue gets to be a different issue at
Right.
the end of the process.
right. Okay, so, does that conclude this item? All right, we will move on to new business item B, resolution to meet in closed session to discuss the personnel evaluation of the city manager pursuant to Section 8A of the Open Meetings Act. A roll call vote is required, and the vote must be approved by 2/3 of the majority of the commission. The commission will adjourn to closed session after all other business has been addressed in open session, and will reconvene to open session after the closed session for the purposes of taking formal action resulting from the closed session, and for purposes of adjourning the meeting. So in the likelihood that there's action after the closed section, members of the public may wish to pay attention to when we come back in and then follow that. But in the, so for the, in that item, we need a motion to go into closed session.
Can I ask clarification? And that is, you want us to do this now versus at the end of the
We
meeting?
make the motion now,
Okay,
and then we go
okay, I
into
thought-
closed session
The end of the
at the end.
Okay, excellent.
But we do the motion now, so.
Yeah, I was just going to make the motion that we go into closed session.
You have to read the,
Oh, sorry. Well then, resolution to meet in closed session to discuss the personnel evaluation of the city manager pursuant to Section 8A of the Open Meetings Act.
So, second.
seconded by Mayor, Commissioner, Commissioner Boutros?
This man.
Yes, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any comments on the motion from the commission? Any comments on the motion from the public? I see none. Ms. Bingham, would you please call a roll call vote?
Commissioner Ballard?
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Yes.
Commissioner Host?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McLean?
Yes.
Commissioner Boutros?
Yes.
Commissioner Haig?
Yes.
Mayor Long?
Yes. All right, motion passes. So we will go into closed session after the conclusion of all other public business. We now move to commission items for future discussion. A motion is required to bring up the item for future discussion at the next reasonable agenda. No discussion on the topic will happen tonight. And as I said earlier, I would like to suggest that pursuant to our strategic goal, which talks about forming a committee, I would like to suggest that in the same way we discussed the sustainability ad hoc committee, that the sustainability committee, not ad hoc, that Commissioner Schaefer supported, that we consider forming an ad hoc committee that helps us evaluate whether we need to do a survey of Birmingham seniors, similar to what they did in Oakland County, specifically for Birmingham, how we might do that, how we assess what the needs are, how we do a comprehensive survey of what resources exist, and then have that committee work hand in hand perhaps with Next, looking at senior services in Birmingham to see how we can have our own sort of successful aging blueprint, how we can support seniors to age in place, how we can look at what their needs are in their homes and for housing options, et cetera. So that's what I would like to suggest.
Do you need a motion from someone?
So you're
other
making a
than the
motion to
mayor?
discuss that?
Yes.
Or, okay, do we
Yes,
have,
you'd need a motion from someone.
yeah,
other than
first,
the
do we
mayor.
have a consensus from the
Yeah, is there a
commissioners that
consensus?
to move forward to discuss it? It's
Yeah.
a three-step.
Place it on a future agenda item.
It's a three-step things. The
Right.
first step, do we agree that
Right.
this is a valid motion?
I move that we discuss the formation of a committee of some sort to
Secret.
discuss senior
Most-
services.
Most of us nod head, yep.
Okay?
So, Mr.
Second.
Marcus, do we need commission and, is that a motion and a second?
Yes, we have a
Okay,
motion and a
okay.
second.
All right.
So to place it up for discussion, to see whether it become an agenda item. So any comments on the motion from the commission? Any comments from the public?
Do you have a, you have
Super exciting.
All in favor?
Why don't we do it?
a, aye,
Any opposed?
done?
All right. Any other items for future discussion? Commissioner Haig?
Based off a communication from the city manager in response to the request of better communication methodology earlier today, asking for a commission vote on further action, I'd like to put that down as an item for us to vote on so that we can have better communication methodologies based off ideas, suggestions that Commissioner Baller and I have both shared that seem to follow some fairly common themes.
So we'd like to bring that,
Three-stepper?
yes,
Another three-stepper? Okay.
starting over with the three-stepper to bring that back again?
Yep,
This being
Okay.
step one
yep.
again? Okay.
Okay, and at what point did we want to, is this is just available for one of those questions?
That was a specific question.
Yeah, that was a
is
specific
answered there.
question.
That's fine. No,
Okay.
this is the more generalized.
All right.
subject. That was a separate question.
All right, so we have a motion, do we have a second? We have a second. Any discussion on the motion from the commission? Any discussion from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, so we have two future items. Going to keep you busy in your last 6 months, City Manager Marcus. Any further items for future discussion? Seeing none, we move to commission items from discussion at a prior meeting. We have none. Removed from the consent agenda, we have none. Communications, there are none. We move to reports. We have notice of intent to appoint to the Cable Casting Board, a notice of intention to appoint to the Parks and Recreation Board, notice of intention to appoint to the Stormwater Utility Appeals Board, notice of intention to appoint to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Those are all upcoming at future meetings, and you can refer to the packet for what positions may be open and what dates applications are due. We now move to commissioner comments. Commissioner comments on this side of the room. Commissioner McLean. Mayor Pro Tem McLean.
Thank you. Two comments, a brief report on the MML Live with the League at noon today. They have to kick off the new year, a brand-new website with a lot of bells and whistles. They will be having regular meetings on the second and the fourth Monday, which will coincidentally remind us to log on, right? Those of us who do it, Commissioner Host does as well. They had lots of good information about consensus moving forward, how they connect with legislators, some of their new programs. Last year, those of us who were new went through new training, and they just want participation. So go to their new website as it rolls out and give them feedback, please. Also, I was appointed to the Transportation Infrastructure and Technology Committee through MML, which I'm extremely excited about because it's infrastructure technology, like from cable, et cetera, and then transportation, which I'm going to learn a ton about. So I will be coordinating with others, mayors and many mayor pro tems, actually, I noticed on the list, John Lamacchia, who is the Director of State and Federal Affairs. So I'll have a routine report that comes from that, and that is learning how legislation at the state level, indirectly at the federal level, trickles down to those of us who are here.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you for being so engaged. Any commissioner comments on this side of the room? Seeing none. Advisory boards, committees, commission reports, and agendas. Legislation, city staff, update on the 48th District Court discussions.
Just want an update on the 48th District Court. Well, I think as I stated in the report, we have been meeting. As you know, during the budget discussions, we've had difficulty reaching out to the judges. We finally got everybody in one room. And when I say everybody, I mean court staff, court administrator, 2 judges, and representatives from all 7 of the jurisdictions, including managers or assistant managers and mayors for each of the 7 communities. It was a fiery discussion, let's just say. It was a long-winded meeting, and I think ultimately it ended up being very productive. And I think we've at least reached a verbal agreement in terms of working out a way to fund it, to make it a little more equitable. I don't want to say completely equitable, but more equitable. So what was agreed at that meeting, at least verbally, was that Birmingham would put together some sort of agreement that would outline what we had talked about that day and agreed upon, and send it around for discussion. I did that in December and sent it around to all of the communities, and I did receive positive feedback. Essentially, basically what it would be the 4 littles, as we call them, or political subdivisions that basically are not one of the main funders in the funding agreement, because we're the main funders with ourselves, West Bloomfield Township and Bloomfield Township. The other 4, which now includes Bloomfield Hills since they opted out, would enter into an agreement that would state that in a year where all of the revenues generated by the court from all of the jurisdictions exceed the court expenses, then they would continue to pay what they do, which is keep 1/3 of their share of the revenues, pay the court their share of court recording costs, which is set out in the statute, and then they'd get whatever's left back. However, in a year where the court's revenues from all of the jurisdictions do not exceed the court expenses, that those 4 communities would agree that any money that would be extra that they would have given back, they would agree to contribute to the whole pot of expenses so that it would reduce the 3 funding units' cost, and they would be contributing to it. So I hope that explains it, but essentially, we, as a funding unit, get to keep 2/3 of our revenue, but we have to pay the bulk of the court expenses, the 3 funding units. The littles, they only get to keep 1/3 of their revenue, but they only have to pay their share of recording services for the court, and all the other expenses fall on the 3 funding units. So the discussion was that it isn't equitable. We don't all split it. You know, we take 7 and we have 30% and someone has 20% and someone has 10% and we pay the costs accordingly. The discussions over the past year were that was not going to be achievable with the smaller units when they have like a $2 million budget for their entire budget, streets, sewers, water, everything, that they just don't have the funding to do that. So I will be coming back to you at a later date. The concept that we verbally agreed on was sent in writing to all of the communities, including the funding units and the political subdivisions. We did get positive feedback from 3 of the 4 political subdivisions. So I had agreed in the email that I sent them, please tell me if this is consistent with what we agreed at the meeting on November 30th, which was a long and arduous process. However, they came back and said, yes, this is consistent with it. And so then I put it into a full document, which is about 3 pages long, 2 pages. It's pretty short, a lot of signature panels. But anyways, we did then, because of the issue that had come up in the past with regards to attorneys and conflict of interest and one jurisdiction using multiple attorneys, what we agreed to on Birmingham's part is not to use Bayer Howlett, because Bayer Howlett also represents Orchard Lake, and there was another couple of municipalities that were sharing another council. So our commitment was, we'll use a separate council, we'll send it out for individual review. We did that. That was basically cleaned up, and the full document, at least the draft, went out today to all of the communities. And so far, I've already heard back from a few who have said, yep, this is still what we talked about. We'll take it to our commissions, councils, or boards. And hopefully, this will work out and be something that you all can live with as well. Basically, this agreement between the 4 littles, the 4 political subdivisions, that says they will not make money in a year when the court's expenses exceed the revenues. They will take that extra money and they will put it into the pot to help fund the court. They're going to sign those 4. This is the intention. They would sign that agreement. We would then take that agreement and attach it as an exhibit to the funding agreement that the 3 funding units signed. So we would have to amend that agreement and add this, and there's a termination provision in that agreement between the 4 political subdivisions as well. And that way, that would help us to feel better that it, at least in the case where the expenditures exceed the revenues, again, those 4 smaller jurisdictions would contribute to the overall cost deficit. So I'm hoping that this is something all of you would be willing to work with. As we indicated at the meeting, I shared with them that I think this would go a long way towards at least agreeing to work out something where we're all contributing in a tough year, and it's not just left on the 3 funding units, and it's potentially avoiding costly litigation if it's something that we all can agree on, and it stops us from wanting to opt out of the funding agreement by the end of January. So the 2 townships were also there. They also received all of the communications, the draft terminology and the full agreement. Today I received some feedback from the Bloomfield Township Supervisor who said, one, I want to see in writing if you have anything that the littles, the 4, actually agreed with this. So I sent them the email that I had in writing and the information of the folks that I had talked to verbally. She also wanted to know who we used for an independent legal review for this agreement. Keep in mind, I wanted to find somebody to represent the city's legal interests, even though we won't be signing as a signatory on that separate agreement, but ultimately it will come in as an exhibit to the main funding agreement. So I did provide the name and information, and I did check with that attorney before I sent everything over to him to make sure that he didn't have any conflicts with the other jurisdictions. He does not. So I sent that over, and at least the Bloomfield Township administrator, she wanted to make sure that this would be covered so she could take it to her board and get funding to use an independent attorney on their side as well.
Okay, well, it's nice to know that even though any loss wouldn't be shared equally, at least the 4 littles wouldn't still be making a profit regardless of what kind of year it was. So that's progress. Mayor Pro Tem McLean.
I just have a question. Is there the same 1-year early notice opt-out provision still in there? Did everyone agree they're going to respect it this time, not like last time?
For the
Without
funding
saying it that
units, the 3 funding units that are left are us and the 2 townships. There wasn't any discussion about changing that provision. So presumably, they still agree with that provision as it was changed last year.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hay?
Sorry. Directionally, because I know Mr. Gerber's not here, I know we were looking at, in the last calculation, approximately a minus 400,000 impact on a bad year. Do we have, again, the package with all the numbers from Mr. Gerber, isn't it? So do we know roughly what the offset would be on that same estimated annual calculation?
Yes, and we have not only run that scenario, but 5 or 6 different scenarios. What do we do if it stays as is with the 3 funding units and we don't pull out of the agreement and the littles don't change anything? What if we pull out and there's 2 funding units and we're considered a political subdivision? What if the whole thing blows up, it goes to litigation, the court decides split the costs based on the proportion of use? What if, basically 7 different scenarios, all of the different things that we talked about, we ran the numbers, and believe it or not, this is one of the best scenarios, given the range of risk, especially, that we could be looking at should this go to litigation.
Understood. Do we
And
know what the number
I'm
is?
not saying it will go to litigation, but the 2 townships supervisors have been very clear that if Birmingham does decide to pull out, there will be litigation. The court representatives have said there will be litigation. The court will be funded, all that. You've already heard that.
Understood. But the question was, do we know what the number is?
Yes, I have a whole spreadsheet I was going to bring to you at the next meeting when we had a full discussion on it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Host.
Yeah, 2 questions for the assistant manager. One is, all things being equal, what the 4 littles have done is, if it were last year, what kind of approximate, money, profit money, would have changed last year's equation for the 3 biggies?
Well, that's what I said we would present at the next meeting, because we have a spreadsheet using 2021's numbers, because those are the only actual numbers we have that have also been audited.
Okay.
So we'll present that to you, you'll be able to see it, and we did it by jurisdiction, so how each jurisdiction's price would go up, or overall cost, so to speak, would go up or down.
Secondly, what did the 2 townships state, or what did the court state about attempting to decrease their budget for this year?
That last meeting started out as a review of their budget to all of the communities. So we basically went through it, the communities did, line item by line item. There was, shall I say, a lot of concern on the court's part that they were not a department of a city or township, and their budget was not, should not necessarily be subject to that level of scrutiny. We tried to convey our position, which is, but you're asking us to fund the money up front and then get hit potentially with a bill at the end of the year, so it is relevant. We know you're not a department of the city per se, but how your numbers come out in terms of revenue affects our bottom line. And therefore, that's why we're interested. Because they kept saying, well, the court is not a money-making machine. I said, we understand that. That's not what we're saying. What we're trying to do is protect our bottom line in terms of what we're going to be out in terms of our budget at the end of the year. So we kept going through that. They said, well, the revenue's not within their control. We said, we understand that. The revenue's based on the number of tickets maybe issued or issues in general that come up in a given community, but the expenditures are. So we went through in great detail. The magistrates, for instance, how many there are, how often they work. Some of the jurisdictions were concerned that the courthouse wasn't open, so to speak, the full business hours. So if something came up at like 3:30, 4 o'clock, they wouldn't be able to process that day. So there was a lot of discussion that way. They did show us, though, line item by line item, that their costs are not going up. I guess the big elephant in the room, so to speak, is what you've heard before, which is how many judges should there be? Should there be 2? Should there be 3? And that's where a lot of the salary information and the large numbers of the expenses come in. That being said, we also did clarify after much discussion and further research when we came back from that meeting that it is true that the vast majority of the funding for the judges' salaries, the salary itself, does flow from the state. However, each of the communities does pay a portion of their benefits. That comes out of our pocket and flows through, so.
Can I clarify what I think you just said, which is they didn't address the expenses?
They did not agree to lower any of the expenses at that meeting. That's correct. They came to you after, on 2 occasions, 2 meetings in December, and the city and the commission approved their budget as is at the second meeting in December. So it's not changed from the first one that you saw. They did justify and explain a lot of the expenditures and show that it didn't go up much at all from previous years. Didn't really address the number of judges question.
Thought we had already addressed that. I mean, I remember us talking about the number of judges, and then, and I'm drawing a total blank on what the court administrator's name is. The gentleman came in, and with his presentation, he showed the data that I'd asked for, which was cases per judge, etc., and it seemed to...
They did not provide cases per judge. They don't keep track of that
total cases and the
information.
number of judges. I remember a comparison chart in the rather detailed package, so I think some of those questions were addressed and didn't raise questions when they were addressed. Am I wrong?
Commissioner, I think like most surveys and statistics, it depends on the input that you're looking at. You recall when you looked at the field of comparables, it was very specific.
Well, I know.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that that approach is average.
Understood, but I think the conversation we had was less looking at the specific of number of judges, but at anything else that was potentially more low-lying fruit before we went down that pathway, because of the nature of how contentious that would be, and that seemed to be adding fuel to a fire. That's certainly the pathway I wanted to take, which wasn't a case of 3's too many, you need 2, you need 1, whatever. No. Where can you make generalizations before we start addressing their personnel? Because that's something that Judge Barron did bring up and said, it's basically his responsibility, and I respect that. He effectively runs the court. So that wasn't an area for discussion as far as I was concerned. That was shelved for the time being. It was where were there other opportunities, and so what you're saying is they didn't really address anything in the other opportunities other than a couple of very specific personnel-related questions.
There was much discussion about many of the line items in the budget. No changes were agreed to by the court.
Okay.
All right, any, City Manager Marcus?
Yeah, and this goes to your point, Commissioner Haig. We may all be on the same page when it comes to the number of judges. If you do an analysis to determine that the percent paid by the state to retain the judges, then maybe the question should be, well, then how many magistrates do you need? Which is coming more out of the city's ends of it, or the participating jurisdictions.
Right.
So I think that's something that would require further analysis and might actually forge, somewhat of a truce between the views of the funding units and the court. I can assure you, the courts are not treated as a department, and the scrutiny that a department gets compared to the scrutiny that the court gets. But at the end of the day, we're the ones that answer for the impact on the costs to our citizenry. And I think that's always something you need to keep in mind. And in this world, everybody should be subject to some level of checks and balances.
And I will tell you, with regard to the magistrates, we discussed that for a long time. All of the other jurisdictions, as well as myself, did bring that up, talked about it, how could they be used better? Could we have fewer hours of use of them? Could we have them handle more? How do we balance it so that it was the best and most efficient use of resources? So we did have a lot of that discussion. You'd be surprised if you go back and look at the numbers in the budget, the magistrate costs are actually relatively small compared to the overall costs.
But they do a lot of the day-to-day.
They do a lot of
And
the
they can do
day-to-day.
more of the day-to-day.
Administrative,
They have experience.
yes, they do.
So, the final part of my observation question. They didn't commit to any firm changes, did they commit? They committed to look at it when we discussed it. Did they commit to continue that, or did they basically say, we're done, we didn't find anything, thanks, book closed?
Well, I would say they agreed to look at it in the future, and then they brought the budget to the commission, and the commission approved it, so there wasn't really any need for them to address it in the coming year. I think they are on notice, so to speak, and I do think that they did agree to commit to have more regular meetings with all of the jurisdictions to keep us up to date on how the numbers were working out at different points throughout the year, and to discuss these issues before it gets to the last minute again.
Yes, exactly.
We're kind of over there.
That's an improvement.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Excellent. Next item, under city staff, E2, communication regarding board and committee activities.
Yeah, I'm going to try and take that item and the attendance at various advisory boards note, which is a report that goes back to December 6th of '21, and then the schedule and Mr. Host communication. But I want to give some context to this. Finally, this whole master plan process is hopefully wrapping up. And hopefully that will be wrapped up this spring. And by that, I mean that there's there's two more meetings scheduled, January 11th, 2023 in front of the planning board, and then February 8th, 2023. And then it comes to the commission. And in spite of my commentary and counseling for commissioners not to get involved, that's all now going to come to an end. And the commissioners are going to have to hold the meetings and, listen to the public's comments and deliberate what should be in the plan or shouldn't be in the plan. I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole 2040 plan process. And I want to give you some comments, and we're going to have some discussion about this at long-range planning as well, under the planning department's long-range items. But let me give you some really pertinent history, because there's some criticism about process in this. The city of Birmingham embarked on a comprehensive master plan update beginning in the summer of 2018. With the creation and posting of a request for proposals soliciting qualified professionals to conduct a comprehensive master plan update, which culminated in the selection of DPZ co-design in the fall of 2018. The master planning process kicked off in January of 2019, after which the city had numerous public input sessions, charrettes, roundtable discussions, neighborhood input sessions, surveys, drop-in clinics, and presentations. Upon receiving the first draft of the Birmingham Plan 2040 plan, the city began to hold what would become nearly 40 total public reviews, discussions between the planning board, the city commission, and several joint meetings, all in the public venue. And you'll see in the long-range planning report that we have all of those various meetings outlined so you can see it. At present, the 2040 plan contains about 31 recommendations with varying levels of complexity. It is imperative to understand that a master plan is not a static document. An annual review of master plan is necessary to complete the following tasks. Review goals and major recommendations. Review action table and progress toward completing this year's priorities. Review prior year's rezonings and development decisions. Discuss if there are any trends, as this goes forward after this is adopted, that need to be addressed. Identify any potential plan amendments to work on for the upcoming year that can be prepared and adopted, then incorporated at a later date when the master plan is updated. Identify any zoning ordinance updates to undertake in the coming year. performing the annual review. This is an annual review that takes place after this plan is adopted. Performing the annual review and thoroughly documenting the process and the machinations of the master plan is essential when it comes to the master plan review after 5 years of adoption, as required by the Michigan Planning Enabling Act. At 5 years, it should be determined whether any amendments are needed or whether the plan is still relevant to today's conditions. So what they're saying there is that we will have a full review of this plan after 5 years. We've been in the process of putting this plan together for almost 4 years. Initially, when this RFP was issued, it was contemplated and issued, I think like I said, in the early part of 19. It was contemplated to be done in June of 2020. Now, you can contend that, maybe COVID had a big part of it. COVID's had some part of it. But this thing has been bounced around. We have 3 commissioners, some commissioners that weren't even here when this all began. So contextually, I think that creates all sorts of concerns. That doesn't change my view that the commission needs to not engage in this process. Mary, and I've included Mary's report back from 2021, Mary could share it. I made it clear that, look, we shouldn't be attending these subordinate boards. And you shouldn't be communicating in such a way that creates the same challenge of attending those meetings by having others do it in your name or based on issues that you've raised. I've counseled enough. I'm not going to counsel anymore. My view is that this is coming back to you as commissioners. I would hope that the commissioners would leave the final processes of the planning board to the planning board. Let them make their recommendations to you. You're the final arbiters of this. The public will have an opportunity to come before you and make their comments. And you can take those into consideration and alter the plan as you see fit. Some might misinterpret my challenges to mean that I don't agree that certain changes are still needed in this plan. Nobody's asked me what I really think of the plan. And I don't intend to engage in that conversation because I believe the plan board is the body of people that you've appointed and you've charged with that responsibility. Like I've said before, let the process work. Do not engage. I have included Mr. Host's most recent point or communication, hard copy communication. The only thing I want to say to you, Brad, about it and to the commission is if you look at the stream of, I guess that was Next Door was the host of some of these communications. If you look at that, you can see that it generates, even though I don't think you've taken a hard position in this letter, the problem is that it's confusing to people. And I think the only communication we should have is we encourage our public to go to the plan board. Get to the plan board and talk about it. Don't identify specific issues. That is a responsibility of our public. In addition to those 40 meetings, we've had, I don't know how many dozens of communications to the public to engage them. And it's gone on, in my opinion, way too long. It's now approaching, 4+ years that we've had this conversation? It needs to come to an end. Whether it's Mr. Host or anybody else, I would suggest stop the communications with the public from your chairs. We are encouraging, we just sent out communications last week, I think, encouraging them to attend these meetings. Let them attend the meetings. Let them express their own views. And then they will come to you. And I suspect that even though we only have one meeting identified, you're going to have a lot more meetings. And you're gonna have a lot of robust conversation at this very table amongst yourselves, as well as listening to the public, engaging the public, and figuring out where the plan needs to go. Like I said, I think there's 33 recommendations, some in that 30 number, that you'll be dealing with. But even though they may inform future decisions, remember this. And the point was made that, the plan is rezoning things, and I think we've now got that clear. The plan is not rezoning things, but it may inform future zoning. In fact, if you ask the planning director will tell you that that master plan document gets referenced with every one of the issues. Well, this is what the master plan says it should be. But then that gets debated. And every rezoning proposal that exists requires not only public notification, but notification to persons within so many feet of the subject property, public hearings in front of the plan board again, and then public hearings at this table for rezonings. It's an ordinance, only commission can pass the ordinances. So that's all I really have to say about it. I've counseled enough.
All right, so that ends the information under city staff. Mr. Bloom, you had a comment?
Hi, good evening, David Bloom. There was a football game on tonight that I was really looking forward to watch. But when I took a look at the packet this evening and what was in the information section, I thought it was too important for me not to come here. I've been going to city commission meetings for a very long time. I've been to lots and lots of meetings when the 2016 plan was talked about. And planning staff, with Jana and now the gentleman behind her, would come up and say, the master plan, says we should do X, or says we shouldn't do Y. And they would make very persuasive arguments about why something should be done or something shouldn't be done, why something should be approved. Attorneys, Rick Ratner, he's the king of anything involving rezoning in Birmingham, would come up before you and make eloquent arguments, and get paid a lot of money for it, I'm presuming, about why something should be approved or not approved for his client. And most of the time, the city commission would agree with what the planning staff is presenting and what the attorneys representing the client is doing. So once something has been approved, the intent of the 2016 plan was to compete with Somerset and develop Birmingham for the future, particularly the downtown. Once that's in stone, developers, business people, attorneys, planning staff will come before this commission or subsequent commissions and ask for changes based on that plan. And those changes usually get approved. And if they're not approved, it's a huge fight, and most people, it's not an enjoyable fight for anyone participating in it. So with the master plan, and I know we've had tons and tons of meetings, and the meetings have been ad nauseum, and I don't think anyone even wants to hear the word master plan anymore. It's important for our city, it's important for our community, and as a resident going through all the master plans, it doesn't feel to me like the people, the consultants that were hired, have gotten the message about the concerns of the master plan, and things just have been moved around, maybe watered down a little. I'm looking at the map, but I can't tell what's in it without spending a ton of time on it, and I guess I have another 2 days to do it. There's a legitimate debate in this community and in this country about whether the community is for the people living there or for the people that want to be there, particularly in an aspirational community with single-family housing. That's a legitimate debate to have, and we should have it, and it should be respectful. But in Birmingham, it's turned into tarring and feathering people. That's not what this community should be. And it's disappointing when it gets there. When I saw the things in the packet tonight, it looked to me like Mr. Host, who's a friend of mine and I respect a lot, was being tarred and feathered from various different, or a few different constituencies. Was Brad wrong to post a video to say this area is going to be rezoned? Yes, he was. But the fact is, this stuff in the master plan wasn't put there not to do it. It's put in there as recommendations for you to approve as a commission, for the planning board to approve. And if you adopt those recommendations, just like the 2016 plan, staff and members of the public that want to develop property and their attorneys are going to come before you and ask for properties to be rezoned because of what's in the master plan, and the chances are it'll be done. If I went out and bought a can of gasoline and started pouring it on my house, anyone driving by here would probably think I'm going to burn down my house and call the police. Okay? That's attempted arson. You wouldn't go to all that trouble. You wouldn't go to hire consultants and have all these meetings and put all this stuff in the plan, recommending changes in zoning if there wasn't an intent to do it. So maybe there's a discussion of degrees of what's said or shouldn't be said, but if it's in the master plan and there's a recommendation and residents don't want that to happen or want it to happen, they should be concerned and they should be able to voice their opinion. And Mr. Host was performing a community service. Mr. Host is on this commission to serve the public, not to be served by the public. I've seen him, I've worked with him. He doesn't need any money from anybody. He doesn't need the grief. He doesn't need the aggravation. He doesn't need to be beat up. And he's up here every single meeting taking it. And it's not fair to him. And it's not fair to this community. And it's not fair to the people that voted for him. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will now adjourn to closed session.
Can I ask the lawyer a question? Or did I miss that opportunity?
About?
The definition of taking, the legal definition of taking property. The simple definition of taking property.
The governmental exercise of its police power and taking property, which is a loaded definition, but there are different ways to take property.
And it is a huge, complex process. It is not something that is decreed from 7 people at the front of a community unilaterally on a Monday night.
Correct.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Tuesday night.
Or Tuesday, right, or
Okay.
Tuesday.
Any night.
It is not
Okay.
something that is
So
going to
we
happen.
are now adjourning till closed session. We will be returning from closed session to possibly take any action resulting from the closed session, and then we will adjourn. Welcome back. We have returned from closed session to discuss the manager's performance review. We have one action item. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion adopting a resolution to amend Mr. Marcus' employment agreement, increasing the annual salary by 4.5%, an agreement with the executive payment action we agreed on in July.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Baller. Any commission comment on the motion? Commissioner McLean?
Thank you for your service.
Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for your service, okay. Any other commissioner comment on the motion? Commissioner
I think
Waller?
it's worth saying that there was
Yes.
generally very positive comments about Mr. Marcus and his tenure, and a lot of gratitude expressed, even though it was in closed session. I mean, there's,
And many accomplishments were
Yeah.
reviewed.
Yep.
Okay, and there's no public comment because we have no public. So Ms. Bingham, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Host,
Yes.
Mayor Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Schaefer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ballard,
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem McLean,
Yes.
Commissioner Haig,
Yes.
Commissioner Boutros.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.